What's up, everybody? My name is Tyler Faust. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I am grateful to be here with my friend tonight, Rick Fannin.
Hey guys, I'm Rick. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ as well. But throughout my life, I've struggled with all kinds of different addictions. I've struggled alcohol, drugs, pornography, sex, and we're kind of going to start something new. We're with a group called Push for Recovery. It stands for Pray Until Something Happens for Recovery. But tonight I thought we'd kind of start talking about step one, talk about denial, talk about powerlessness, talk about unmanageability. So Tyler, for you, how did denial play into your addiction?
Oh man, how didn't it? Denial was a big thing for me for a lot of years, a lot of wasted years. Where I knew I was struggling, I knew something was off. I couldn't, I wanted to quit. I wanted to quit my drug of choice. I couldn't. But it was hard for me to admit, okay, maybe I need some help. As a man, we like to figure things out on our own. But I there was something different with this addiction. It just had a hold of me to a point where I couldn't get over it on my own. And denial was just, it hung around so long. I mean, it still would be here unless I let it go. So I literally had to choose to get over my denial and admit, okay, I am powerless. I don't have this under control.
For me, I was successful in a lot of different areas of my life.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that made recovery so hard for me. Mm-hmm. I've been able to do good in jobs, good in career, good as a dad for a period of time.
Yep.
But then admitting, man, this thing has me whipped. I can't do it. It was hard.
Yeah, it's hard because, we'll put it together a couple days, put together a couple hours. See, I told you I could do this.
Yeah.
And,
that was that thing too. I would admit, I'm powerless over this. And I'd string together a few days, a few weeks, a few months, and somehow convince myself I can do this. Mm-hmm. Did you ever kind of fall into that?
I countless times. I literally think it's over 10 times that's happened to me where, like you said, you put together a couple months and get back out. And it's easy to do it when you have accountability and you're in a facility. But when you get out in the real world and you're by yourself and it's actually available, and you know where it's at. And, that's when it's hard. That's when it actually counts.
Oh, I forgot to tell you. Did I tell you about my friend Jesse? Kind of what's going on with him?
No.
So he's got a peanut allergy. You ever known somebody that has a peanut allergy?
I have not.
So I don't know. It started probably close to a year ago. He ate some peanuts, felt like he couldn't breathe. He goes to the hospital, and the doctor says, "Oh, dude, you've got a peanut allergy." And they hit him with an EpiPen and told him, "Don't ever eat peanuts again." And he left and kind of freaked him out a little bit. But about a week later, I'm talking to him, and I'm like, what are you up to? And he's like, I just got back from the hospital. Why? What happened? Well, I ate some peanuts again. I'm like, why'd you do that? He goes, man, I thought it was just a fluke. I thought it was just a bad batch of peanuts that I had. And I said, well, what did the doctor say? And he told me, he goes, dude, you were here just a week or so ago. I told you got a peanut allergy. Don't eat any peanuts. And, I don't know, it was probably a month goes by. Same thing happened. I'm like, dude, what happened? He goes, well, they put so many additives and stuff in peanuts nowadays. He goes, I figured it's all that. So I got some organic peanuts, like some of them that are still in the shell. Same thing.
Same thing.
And man, he did really, really good for, I don't know, probably 6 months then. And talked to him and I'm like, man, how you doing? He goes, dude, I almost died. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, I thought it was because maybe if I mixed it with something, if I didn't have just peanuts, but maybe if I had peanuts and chocolate, those good to go. And so I got him a great big Reese cup, and he did almost die. They had to resuscitate him and stuff because he completely quit. That'd be crazy, wouldn't it?
It'd be insane.
But we do that.
Every time.
We do that all the time. We are unable to just accept the truth about something.
Acceptance.
And You know, if I were doing that with peanuts, and I'd be like, dude, what is wrong with me?
Right.
There is something seriously wrong with me. You need to put me in a straitjacket. Something is wrong. But when it comes to alcohol, when it comes to drugs, we continue to struggle with it. And we just can't see the truth. We can maybe see the truth, but we can't accept the truth.
You know, just that got me thinking. It's almost like if we did that with peanuts, knowing that we had an allergy to where we could die every time we took it, and we continue to do it, some people would probably think we're suicidal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Why not with the same? I mean, it's the same thing with drugs and alcohol.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't know if you ever got to that, but kind of those rock bottom moments,
Oh yeah,
death looked like a good option.
better option than what we were going through at that time.
You know, it was, for me, it was hell on earth. And, you know, in the AA Big Book, it talks about the turning point. And it says that turning point is that moment in time where we couldn't imagine life with it or without it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever experience that?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
What was that like?
I just remember waking up one day. You know, I tried to quit on my own a few times. And I remember waking up and I told myself, you know, I'm not going to do this today. I think I made it like an hour. And through that hour, it was nothing but agony, you know, contemplating, well, I could do this. I don't need it. I do need it. I don't need it. And my mind kept swaying back and forth. And it was just like, you know, being inside of a washing machine, getting tossed around in my mind. And at that point, I realized, like, I couldn't live with this, and I couldn't live without it.
I couldn't imagine living without it.
Right.
I couldn't imagine not having my dysfunctional binky, right? And that's what it was. It was that thing that, excuse me, it brought me comfort. If I was anxious, if I was sad, it brought me joy. If I had a good day, I used it like a baby would use a binky, right? But man, it stunk. It was nasty, dirty. Took me to places I never in my life would have imagined I would have went.
And all during that time, you were still in denial.
Yeah. How about this? How many times did you tell others that you were powerless, but you knew on the inside that
I wasn't ready to accept it.
you weren't ready to accept it, or that you thought somehow, some way, you can be a social crackhead again?
Well, you know, the funny thing is, I think I told myself more than others, like, I am powerless over this. Then I lied to myself more than anybody else. When it came to telling other people that, it's just, you know, I didn't really talk about it much with other people. I didn't want other people to know my problems, how bad they really were. So I kind of just kept it to myself, but I was a very good liar to myself. And I could con myself into believing, oh, you got this, man. It's okay. You know, one more time, it can hurt. I can do this socially, maybe once a week. Maybe I won't use that, but I'll use this, you know. And I tried every way of getting around having to admit to myself that I had a problem with it.
Yep. What was it like? Did you ever have any family members approach you, or, like,
Yeah.
lack of a better word, an intervention?
Yeah, I did. It's probably like 7, 8 years ago. And I was using Percocets at the time, and it didn't get to that other point yet, but it got bad just on those. And I remember coming home once. I was supposed to get a haircut, and I was like, all right, my sister's going to be there. So I saw her car. I was like, all right, I'm going to go get my haircut. I walk in the door, and my whole family and a couple of my friends and this person I didn't know is sitting around a table, and they're all just like stare at me as soon as I walk in.
Did you know what was up as soon as you came in?
Yeah, I looked at them and I was like, nope. Shut the door. I turned right back around. They came out and got me, you know, and I went back in, and it was the most awkward thing. And it's hard to hear that, but if you're not ready, if you're still in denial, it has no effect, I don't think. I mean, yes, I heard them, and I took what they were saying as a grain of salt, really, because it went in one ear at the other. All I was thinking was, God, I got to get out here and get this feeling off me, you know?
What was the shame like?
It was heavy.
Yeah.
It was heavy. I had to numb it. I had to numb the guilt, the shame. I had to get away. I couldn't stand being in the same room with them. Just knowing what I've done and why they're there. It was bad. I don't have anything against interventions, but mine didn't go that great. So
you talked about I didn't want to be around family, and I think that's one of those things that's real common with us that struggle with addiction. Is we had a mentor named Charlie.
Yeah,
Charlie. And one of the things Charlie used to always tell us was that addiction is all about isolation, recovery is all about connection. And it's so true. In the darkness of my addiction, I would isolate myself from anybody that cared about me. I'd isolate myself from my friends, my family, but really, more than anything, I think I isolated from that true and authentic version of myself, and I isolated myself away from God. I grew up in a church. I knew God at a young age and got so far away from it. And when we get caught up in addiction, man, that shame is overwhelming. And I couldn't stand to see the look in my mother's eyes.
Yeah.
That hurt, And so my solution was, I just won't go there.
When do you think you came to the point of having radical acceptance?
I think radical acceptance is a kind of an unfolding process. For me, I went to rehab. It was a faith-based rehab. I gave my life back to God, and I was on fire for God. I was on fire for recovery. And as long as life was going good, my recovery was going good. But just coming up on a year clean and sober, man, life kicked me right in the butt.
Yeah.
And I kind of, lack of a better word, I had spiritual arrogance. No, God's got this, and all I got to do is have faith, and all things work together for good. And I believed it, but I didn't act on that belief. Right? Faith is one thing, but faith without works is dead. And I was lying to everybody because they would ask, how you doing? I'm okay.
Yeah.
But on the inside, I was falling apart. And I think I white knuckled it for about 4 days. And at 2 days away from a year, at 363 days, I relapsed.
I remember that day.
Who does that?
Rick.
This guy. Right?
People.
And kind of what I've learned is I have a tendency to get what I call sobriety amnesia. I forget how bad the bad was, and I forget what I had to do each and every day to scratch, claw, and climb my way out of that rock bottom moment. Once you start in this process, developing a routine and routinely following it, man, it builds recovery and spiritual muscles.
Absolutely.
But if you stop doing it, just like if you stop working out, man, the muscles shrink. And you forget that piece of it. So your question about radical acceptance, I went through kind of a grieving process. I had to grieve the death of the dysfunctional version of myself. If you think about it, if you've ever experienced a death in your life, you go through those different stages of grief. There's 5 of them.
I think.
Denial. I lived in that for a long, long time.
Absolutely.
But that next one is bargaining. So I bargained with addiction a lot. And before I ever went to rehab, it was, it's because I drink bourbon. That's the problem. So I'll switch to vodka. It didn't help.
Yeah.
Or I'll only drink on the weekends. That didn't help. I won't start drinking until after 6 o'clock. And then got the bright idea, I'll try heroin. That didn't work. Crack, that didn't work. Well, but we bargain with things.
Yes, we do.
And in recovery, we'll bargain with things, right? If you happen to have sold drugs, made a lot of money doing that.
Absolutely.
So we'll try to bargain with the dysfunction and convince ourselves of a lie that I won't use, but I'll just sell it. And we try to straddle a fence, and you can't.
No.
because if you're around it that much, eventually you're going to do that. So you kind of go through those different stages. I remember when I was confronted with the reality of what was going on in my life, and I was angry. I was angry. I was angry at my family. I was angry at the world. I was angry at God. More than anything, I was angry at myself.
Yeah.
Right? How did I let myself get here?
Mm-hmm.
But then that next stage is kind of sadness. And it was back to that thing I said, I couldn't imagine life with it or without it. In that sadness portion of grieving the death of dysfunction, I couldn't imagine having fun again.
Right.
I didn't want to be just plain and boring. And that's what I thought life would be without it. Did you ever go through those stages?
I did. I mean, definitely the first two a lot. Bargaining, justifying, denial. I think my journey was a little different in just the radical piece of it, because I denied it for 15 plus years. It wasn't until I hit my absolute rock bottom that I was able to say, okay, enough's enough. I accept this problem. I need help. And it took an event, like a life and death event, to actually get me there. Now, that's just my experience. I was lucky, though, to have family members kind of help me through that process with God, my spiritual walk, and I'll never forget sitting on that couch in the morning and saying to myself, Tyler, you're not going to have a life unless you do it with Christ.
Yeah.
And then once I accepted that, because that was the hardest thing to accept. I saw Christians as these holier than holy people that don't know how to have fun. They can't go out and do nothing. I was like, I can't do that. I just can't do that. Mm-hmm. It wasn't even about that, though. That's just the enemy trying to distract me and saying that I can't do it. It was all about just accepting Christ as my Lord and Savior and my leader. Mm-hmm. And once I accepted that, that was the turning point of it all, that radical acceptance. And it was easy. It was easy just to do it. Once you make your mind up, it's not hard. Just do it.
So step one is we admitted we were powerless over drugs and alcohol and that our life had become unmanageable. Mm. What do you think is the most important word in that?
In that saying?
Yeah, in that step.
I think there's two really important words. I think powerless would probably be the number one, but unmanageable second, close.
The third one that's in there is we. We admit it. Because see, my best thinking is what led me into addiction to begin with.
Yep.
And man, I need somebody like you in my life that is close enough to me that can call me out on my BS, but far enough away from me that I don't have so many chips on the table that I can actually listen to you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Take it. Hear somebody what they're saying.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Because I need that. I need somebody that, dude, are you doing okay?
Yeah.
And I'll give you that, oh yeah, I'm all right. No, seriously, man. Are you okay?
Yeah. I hate when people do that to me.
Yeah. What's it like?
Oh man, it's like, I said yes, I'm good. But and then it's like when you can actually trust somebody to open up and be vulnerable with them, that's like, it's almost a lifesaver.
Was trust hard for you?
Absolutely.
I think it's one of those common things for all of us in recovery. We have trouble trusting people.
Yeah. I can't even trust myself.
Do you think that bleeds over in struggling to trust God?
I do, especially if you don't have a foundation early on in your childhood.
And a lot of us don't, right?
Right.
The research on addiction shows that anywhere from 65% up to upwards of close to 80% have a history of trauma. And trauma has that way of, if a traumatic event happened to you, it robs you of power, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one of those things with step one that makes it kind of difficult for somebody that has a history of trauma is I had this event that happened when I was 10 years old that robbed me of power. And now you want me to admit that I'm powerless? Mm. It's hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, I can see that. I could also see, an event like that happening at a young age, you know, God, why'd you let this happen to me? Yeah, there goes the trust. So I've been through that. I understand that. For me, I was lucky, you know, I was raised up in the church, so I actually had a foundation with God and who He was to me at a young age before anything bad could happen. So I think that helped with being able to give Him my trust when I needed it the most in step one.
So let's kind of maybe shift gears a little bit and kind of start dissecting that, right? So step one, we admitted we were powerless. You know, that powerlessness, it can be tough, right? We kind of talked about that. But the unmanageability was hard to deny, right? How did it make your life unmanageable?
Well, at first, you know, it wasn't as bad. It was later on in my addiction that it really became unmanageable when it just started off with not being able to hold a job. I would have to go get my fix before I could go into work. If I couldn't get my fix, I'd either be late, I would, you know, not show up, no call, no show. So really, it all started in the beginning with just my job. Once I lost my job, I think it went downhill very fast from there to you know, my relationships. You can't really hide you're doing well if you don't have a job because you're bumming for money, you're doing other stuff. So it then leaked into my relationships. First and foremost, God. My relationship with God was non-existent at that time. And then, you know, finances went out the window. To pretty soon living on a couch and not having a place of your own. And it's funny because, you know, I did that for a couple of years. So couch surf, man. I had a lot of friends. I had a lot of acquaintances, right? Not friends. Acquaintances that opened up their couch to me or whatnot. And, you know, I just think it's easier to accept that you're powerless. For me, it was at least to say, man, I am powerless. I know I'm powerless over this because I got to have it every day. But my life's not that unmanageable. I still have a couch to go to if I need to, you know? That's how I thought. So for me, it was totally opposite of what you just said. It was, you know, the powerlessness. I knew I was powerless. I knew I couldn't stop on my own. But the unmanageability was harder for me to see and recognize just because I had parents that loved me. I was very lucky, and they enabled me for a long time. I had friends that enabled me. So I always had food. I always had a place to sleep. And I think, you know, that as long as I had that, my life was still manageable to a degree, and in my mind, right? So it took a long time for me to recognize that.
Looking back over kind of your life and addiction, what was that moment? What was that one defining moment for you where you finally accepted it's got to change?
Yeah. So the last time that I tried to quit using on my own, you know, I knew I wanted to quit. I didn't want to go into rehab again. It would have been the 10th time. So I got this grand idea that, hey man, I'm gonna quit on my own. I'm gonna take this other medicine to help me get through the withdrawals. And what that other medicine was is it's going to knock me out for hopefully a couple days. So I remember doing my last bit of heroin. I took that Xanax, fell asleep like it was supposed to, slept for like 12 hours, woke up, and, you know, right in the middle of the withdrawal. So my bright idea was to go get my fix. Well, I never mixed the two. So I was literally on my way home. I got my fix. I'm driving down Hilliard Rome Road. It's 55 mile per hour road. I'm probably going 60, 65, knowing me. And next thing I know, I'm by Menards. There's a turn like that. And the next thing I know, I woke up and I'm driving through a cornfield. I literally missed a tractor by this much, going 60 mile an hour. I then got out of the cornfield, drove across the street into my apartments, and I'm 20 feet from my doorstep. And I blacked out again, rear-ended a car, totaled my vehicle right in front of my door where my wife's watching the cops arrest me from the balcony. That was my turning point. The next morning, I woke up and I went back and I had to get my car out of the apartment complex. I went and drove by the field and I saw just how close I came to hitting that tractor. And at that moment, I realized, and I was like, I almost died. I mean, I could have died very easily. I could have hit a car head on. I could have killed somebody else. And that was the real turning point. Like I said, I'll never forget this. I was like, I told my wife I need to get help. And that was the first time I've ever done it on my own.
What was that like?
Freeing.
Really?
It was. Once I was like, man, the thing I love and hate about recovery, it's all cliche. You got to surrender to win. You got to quit to win. It's so true. You just got to let go to get over it. If you keep holding on to it, the more you try to fight, the more it gets worse. And I had to come to that realization. And God spoke to me that day on the couch. I was in tears, and He said, "You're not going to have a life unless you live it with me." And I'll never forget that. It was like He sat on the couch right where you are talking to me and said that to me. And I said, "Okay, God." And then that day I went into Parkside. And that was my turning point. I haven't looked back since. That was the defining moment where I knew I couldn't go under it. I couldn't go over it. I couldn't go around it. I had to walk through this straight forward. And I had to go through it. But I had somebody to go through it with me, and that was Jesus. And once I realized that, it got a lot better.
And what's kind of ironic about it is pain leads us to freedom.
Yep, I agree.
We've spent a life trying to avoid pain. And in doing it in addiction, man, the pain just kept getting greater and greater and greater. Yeah, my recovery verse from the Bible that I relate to the most is in 2 Corinthians. And it's where Paul is talking about the thorn in the side. And it says, 3 different times I begged God to take it away. And man, I can relate so much to my addiction. God, please, I'm begging you, please take this away. God, please, I'm begging you, take this away. God, please take this away. And that in that verse, it says, God responds back and He goes, my grace is all you need. My power works best in your weakness. While it doesn't feel like it, pain is one of the greatest gifts that we have. Mm-hmm. Pain always serves a purpose. And it doesn't matter if it is financial pain, relationship pain, physical pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain. Pain always is this megaphone of an indicator to let you know something needs to change.
That's good.
And if it weren't for the pain, I never would have experienced the fullness of God's grace.
Or the victory.
And in that discovery is where I finally accept His grace, His life, His truth is all I need.
I remember that verse hit really home to me as well. My mom, my sister and brother-in-law always told me, God can take this from you. God can take it from you right now. And I remember we would sit in prayer rooms for hours on hours, praying, God, please take this from me. Mm-hmm. And it was a still small voice. He said, it's not mine to take. It's yours to give.
Yeah.
And His grace allowed me to give it finally, that acceptance, right?
You know, one of the things I think many of us make the mistake of is we see drugs or alcohol as the problem.
That was the solution.
And that problem needs to be removed. Mm-hmm. That could be why God doesn't take it from us.
Absolutely.
Right? Because He's like, you're trying to get me to do the perfect solution to the wrong problem, dude. It ain't the drugs that's the problem. You got a cancerous problem on the inside.
Oh.
Right? And you're right. That's one of my favorite things. I think each and every one of us have this God-shaped hole.
Yeah.
For me, throughout most of my life, I felt empty inside. I felt like something was missing out there.
Yeah.
And I was desperately looking for something to fill that void. Mm-hmm. And tried it with drugs, tried it with alcohol, tried it with women, tried it with sex. Money, success, career. For me, each of those things filled that emptiness, but just for a second.
And then it left you.
And it left you. And it was like a kid at Christmas. What's next, right? I'm done with that toy. What's next?
Yeah.
And man, it was just this vicious, ferocious cycle of trying to find something to fill it. But when you actually fill it with God, you don't need anything.
Sustains you.
It sustains you.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. That's one thing that it was really hard for me to comprehend that, because living in a sinful world as we do, we want worldly things. And it was like, okay, how does God fill this? And it wasn't until actually giving him a chance to fill it that I experienced his love, and I experienced that, just purposefulness that he gives you, that really drives you. But you're absolutely right. That pain led us to a position that we could actually experience the fulfillment, the victory, the love from God. And I'm so grateful for that pain.
Yeah. You can apply step one, set drugs and alcohol aside. Pick other things in your life. In addiction, were you powerless over telling the truth?
Oh, yeah.
And did it make your life unmanageable?
Oh, yeah.
Were you powerless over lust?
Yeah.
Did that make your life unmanageable?
Absolutely.
And you see, you can apply that step one to so many different areas of your life. But it's when you truly just radically accept it is what it is, and I can't eat peanuts anymore, right?
Right.
And that's when you cannot change something if you don't accept it first.
That's good.
You can't change something if you don't accept it first.
That's really good. That's good. So, just knowing and accepting that there's an issue, you can't really heal an issue if you don't know you have one.
Right.
So acceptance comes, in Jeremiah, it talks about, healing a wound, but you can't heal a wound if you don't know you have that wound.
Right.
So you need to know, first off, I have this wound, I accept that I have this wound, and I need help, and I need healing from it. And once you do that, I believe that you can get that healing.
Yep. Tyler, there were times where, honestly, I think I could have passed a polygraph in the sincerity of my promise. I will never, ever do this again. I believe I was telling the truth of what I believed, but then it would turn around and I would do it again. And it reminds me so much of Romans 7:15. It says, I don't really understand myself, for I want to do what is right, but I don't. Instead, I do what I hate. Did you ever feel that? Did you ever promise yourself, I will never do this again?
I honestly can't count how many times I've done that. I've done that so much, over and over and over. And every single time I've really had the sincerity of this is it. This is really it. And here's the thing: when we're down in the pit, when we're at rock bottom, it's easy to say that thing. It's easy to depend on God. But when we get a little bit, a couple of days, I'm feeling better.
Yeah,
it's easy to forget that thought of that sincerity of, man, I'm done with this.
It's back to the pain thing again, right?
Yeah.
Pain is the greatest motivator that you have.
Yeah.
If I light that chair that you're setting on fire, you're highly motivated to get up and out of it.
Yeah.
And in those rock bottom moments, I'd pray, right? I'd go years without praying, but in a rock bottom moment, oh God, don't let those blue lights be for me.
Please, Lord.
And when they are, oh God, get me out of this. I swear, God, I promise I will do anything.
Yeah.
And we do.
Yeah.
And we start to scratch, claw, and climb our way out of that rock bottom. When we're in the rock bottom, pain is here. And when we start to put those steps of action and get our way up out of it, pain drops. And once it gets to here, my motivation drops.
That amnesia kicks in.
That amnesia kicks in. And that's when it's like, well, God, I said I'd do anything. I didn't say how long, right?
I'll do anything in that moment.
In that moment.
Yeah. Now I'm a little better. And it's for me, it was so easy to forget and, just go back to it like it was nothing. Like that never even happened. And then, I'd use it again, and I'd be right back in that pit. And I'd be, oh God, I'm never doing this again. I messed up really bad this time.
Yep.
You never think it could get any worse.
So did you notice the mistake that you and I made in those? I.
Yeah.
It all changes when it's no longer I, it's we. Right?
Community.
Yeah. You come into the community of the rooms of recovery, the rooms in a church, the community of other broken people that have gone through similar stuff. And I don't know what it is about it, but it's powerful, right? That all of a sudden, when somebody else is telling their story of what it was like, what happened, what it's like now, I could relate so much. I was like, man, you're like telling my childhood story.
Right.
Or when they talk about that rock bottom, that turning moment, maybe that's where I'm at right now. But if I've connected with those two parts of their story, then I get to piggyback and connect to the message of hope. And for me, I was like, man, if they can do it, why can't I?
Right. Right. You know, and I really, truly don't. I believe that you can't get from an I to a we without understanding powerlessness. Because once that powerlessness is accepted, then it becomes a we.
Well, one of the gifts that comes along with that powerlessness is humility.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not so much a gift, but in that moment.
In that moment.
Right.
But in hindsight, it's a great gift.
Yeah.
Right. It was my pride that kept me sick. It was my ego that kept me sick. It was my fear that kept me sick. But in that rock bottom, crushing moment, I was humbled. I was humbled to the core. And it's why it's so important in recovery to stay humble. That's probably harder than not using.
I think that's that kind of like lingers, especially when you do get a little bit of time under your belt. That pride still lingers. Being humble kind of goes out the window a little bit.
Yep.
And I think that's the hardest thing to keep is that humility. Yep. And that's why coming to these programs and we share our stories, that's what keeps me humble.
And honestly, I've made, like you talked about, having lots of friends and you corrected yourself and you're like, no, they were just acquaintances, right? It's probably the first time in my life I've got true friends.
Absolutely.
And it's not like I just have one or two. I've got like a gaggle.
Gaggle. Never heard of that word. Gaggle.
I think it's a group of geese. Yeah, I think so. But I got a bunch of them.
I got a bunch of them.
Gaggle. But they're true and authentic friends.
Yeah.
Right? They're
Absolutely.
People, they don't want anything from me.
Everything.
They would drop. I could call you at 3:00 in the morning. You'd pick up.
Yep.
I could call and say, dude, I'm struggling. You'd be there.
Absolutely.
And that feels so good.
It does.
Many of us didn't have that.
And many of us, I think all of us,
Yeah.
have that.
And there's so many blessings that come along with recovery, right?
More than you can count. More than you can even sit here and try to talk about right now.
I remember you saying when you had started back into recovery after 10 rehabs that I don't want to go to meetings. I don't want this to be my life.
This is not what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I need about 30 days here and I only want to do counseling.
Right.
I remember that day.
Did it change?
Absolutely. I'm here today on my own free will. It's funny. It went from, man, I have to go to this to I get to go to this. And that was a big turning point when, it was funny. It's like, man, I'm not going to have a life. I'm going to be going to this IOP 3 nights a week or 3 hours a night. I'm not going to see my wife. I'm going to be busy all the time. And it's like, after like a month, you kind of got used to that schedule and you got to know those people. And you got to see not only help yourself, but others. It turned from, man, I get to go. I can't wait until Tuesday night. Or I can't wait until Thursday night.
Yep.
And it was just a cool turning point.
I know when I was in rehab, the biggest difference that I see, because I've stayed in contact with a lot of people I was in rehab with, the biggest difference that I saw from those that made it and those that didn't were the ones that I get to be here versus I've got to be here.
Yeah.
And it's that attitude of gratitude that makes a huge difference.
Well, you just, the more that you go and the more that you see your life change and the more you see the goodness from the programs and promises coming to fruition, the more you want. It's like, man, I don't have to. I get to go to this so I can experience these promises. And it's once you experience those promises, it's like, wow, this is so much better than what my life used to be. Why would I not want to continue to do this? And then, we're skipping ahead from step 1, but when you get to step 12 and you get to give it back, that's a whole nother story.
So let's talk about step 1.5. right? So if I admit that I'm powerless and I admit that my life has become unmanageable, that is a scary, scary place to be. And to me, I kind of got to where it's not that I'm just powerless, I'm paralyzed. For me, it just stuck better, that there is literally nothing that I can do to change this.
It's also kind of gratifying too.
Well, only if you have hope.
Exactly.
And that's what we get from step 2, because if I don't have hope and I'm powerless or paralyzed and it just continues to get worse, what do I do?
Go back out.
Right. And a lot of people come into recovery, they got an issue with God, right? Truly radically working step 1 and not believing just with your mind, but with your entire essence. I am powerless. And look at my life. It's unmanageable. It makes, is there a God, a very, very easy yes or no answer.
Sure.
Because if the answer is no, there isn't a power greater than myself that can restore me to sanity. What other option do you have?
None.
So with that, man, I hope you liked it. Drop some comments. Be sure to hit like and share with others that could benefit from this. But in the next one, we will dig into step 2 and we'll talk about we came to believe.
Came to believe. That's going to be a good one.